Tell us about how Canada has been changing in your lifetime, the Canada that you inherited from your parents and the Canada today.
Oh, it's profoundly different in the sense of what its goals were from the different generations. When I graduated from the university at the end of 1950s, uh, as I have said a number of times, the world was my oyster, where the foundations for the Canadian welfare state had been put in place or were going to be completed just a couple of years later by universal health care. So we had the view grounded by my parents' generation after World War II that what were once seen to be either privileges for the rich, i.e., access to university, or needed assistance, i.e., help for the poor, employment insurance, were seen to be private concerns, essentially, charitable organizations, or in the case of the rich families would look after their kids to go to university. Well, after the war, not only in Canada, but at that time also in the United States and in Western Europe, we had the emergence of a serious counter view. Put in place was by a range of politicians, actually, pushed by the left, clearly, but picked up by the centrist liberals in Canada, by the deeply reformed under Roosevelt Democrats in the US, and of course Labour in England, social democratic parties in Europe, was the view that citizenship itself ought to include not just political and civil rights, but economic and social rights. So there was an expectation that of equality of citizenship. What did that come to entail? It came to entail fully adequate, what we called then unemployment insurance if you were out of work, a good pension for everyone, universal health care, um, good funding for the arts seemed to be a function of government as well. So there is a sense, if you like, in my formative years, that we were likely going to have a market economy or a market-based economy, but not a market-determined society. That there was a role for democratic government to play in shaping our lives in a non-market, non-commodity kind of basis. And so I grew up, I really do believe, with a state of optimism that was generated by this mixture of private economy, if you like, but also a very positive and active state. And all the parties, by the time I came to be elected, for example, to Parliament in the 1960s, there was an expectation, say, of Mr. Trudeau, who was then Prime Minister, Mr. Stanfield, who was leader of the Conservative Party, as well as myself, that the name of the game was to have more and more equality. It was an unstated assumption that we would become more equal in terms of economic benefits, yes, but also it came to include, very importantly, gender issues, ethnic issues, sexuality. But the drive, I believe, came from social and economic rights of an economic foundation where a more secure majority accepted more willingly the new place of women, long overdue, accepted more willingly the greater diversity of the ethnicity of our population, because they had this social and economic foundation of confidence. That was my Canada. And it began to unravel, as most people know now, with the election of Margaret Thatcher in England in 1979, Ronald Reagan 1980. The right wing, properly defined, set out to destroy what David Frum, who is Canadian-born speechwriter for George Bush, described as social democracy. Writing in the New Yorker not long ago, he said the agenda of these new conservatives that came on the scene in the 1980s wanted to get rid of this social democratic framework of citizenship. So they used temporary structural problems to blame everything on the state, not say just on oil prices, which peaked then, and certain other problems. And they began a dismantling. And government became the enemy. That spread like cancer, in my view, to Canada. It came up to us in Michael Harris in Ontario in the 90s. Preston Manning and Reform had the same kind of ideological framework, that the government is the enemy. Not that the government should be seen as a partner, a democratic partner with the private sector, if you like, but the enemy. This has led to the most serious growth in inequality in Canada in my lifetime. Well documented by the CCPA, Armenia Onitsyn, and other Canadian economists spread across the country have shown from the 1990s, say, to the present, almost all the income growth has gone to the top 10%. The middle class has remained virtually static. The poor are sort of where they were before. Child poverty that was supposed to be abolished in an 11-year period between 89 and 2000, when we adopted a motion in Parliament saying by the year 2000, let's rid ourselves of that child poverty. We're 2 percentage points lower only in the level of child poverty than we were in 1989. In the meantime, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany have virtually eliminated child poverty. So we have growing inequality, not accidentally, not because of some necessity of the state, of the government, but by willful decision by government, by ideological decision, driving where a market economy would have led on its own, driving it further, rather than using the power of democratic government to redirect resources, to interfere with, if you like, the direction of a market economy for the benefit of the majority. So we are back where we were in distribution of income in the United States, Canada, a number of other countries, where we were in the 1920s in terms of shares of income. So there's a twofold message for me in this. We've had a terrible assault on democratic equality. Equality is, since the Greeks, been the key value associated with democracy. But secondly, it's been self-imposed. It's been done directly through the electoral process by electing people who had inequality as their basic ideological agenda. So just as it was put in place politically some years ago, we have the negative effects. So to deal with it, we need a change in our politics to bring back an agenda of social equality.